Hi everybody, and welcome to the video on systemic circulation patterns. Let's break that down a little bit. First of all, circulation. How things get transported all over your body. And patterns. You're going to see some patterns, things that happen over and over again. For example, how blood gets into and out of your heart is going to be a pattern you're going to see over and over again. Now, where it goes between there is going to be different. So, for example, we're going to look at the pattern of how blood goes to your arms and back, or to your head, to your major intestinal organs, to your legs, to your kidneys, to your lungs. So, we're going to use those circulation patterns to help us study how blood gets transported systemically all over our body. And you can see in the picture, there's a lot of patterns, but we're going to keep things a lot simpler than this. So we're going to be using a picture that looks like this, much simpler. So we're going to go through the major vessels, the major arteries and veins that go all over your body. So let's do that. So let's look at those arteries and veins all over your body. So to recap, arteries. By definition, arteries carry blood away from your heart to everywhere in your body, and veins do the opposite. They carry blood too. In between, or actually let me back up. If I think of this as a road system, arteries are like your major interstates. And the largest interstate we have in our body is the aorta. And veins are also interstates. They're the largest interstate highway in your body are the vena cavas, the superior and inferior vena cava. Now, in between, those highways have off-ramps and on-ramps, and so our off-ramps from the aorta branch into smaller and smaller highways and roads and streets and then driveways to every cell in our body. And those little tiny driveways are known as capillaries, and that's where all the goods are exchanged. We can see oxygen going to our cells, nutrients going to our cells, and then we also see waste and carbon dioxide going from our cells back into those roads and back up to our heart to be filtered and cleaned and all that stuff. So when we talk about the major arteries and veins going to and from various places, just know that when we get to those various places, these capillaries in those organs, in your legs and your kidneys and your liver, that's where all the goods are exchanged. So let's take a look at that, where the goods are exchanged. So the first circuit we're going to take a look at is one you're probably familiar with, and that's the pulmonary circuit. You can see in this picture that we have our heart, and our pulmonary circuit deals with the exchange of gases in our lungs. So this circuit is a pretty short trip between the heart and the lungs. And the job or the goal of this circuit is to get rid of CO2 and pick up oxygen. And how do we do that? The route's pretty simple. So if we start in the heart, in the lower chamber, the ventricle, that's going to pump blood through the pulmonary trunk and split to the arteries. And then those arteries divide into those different roads and streets and capillaries of each lung where the goods are exchanged. Our pulmonary veins bring that freshly oxygenated blood back to the left atrium of our heart, our left ventricle then, and this, my folks, is the gateway to the systemic circulation, the aorta. The aorta is going to branch up, it's going to branch down, and take blood everywhere. So this is the pulmonary circuit. It's the gateway to systemic circulation. So here we are again in this picture in the systemic patterns. And so we're going to be dealing a lot with what's here. So let's zoom in that part. So what we have are the four chambers, the right atrium, the ventricle on the right side, the upper left atrium, and then the lower left ventricle. And so the major vessels going in are the upper vena cava, the superior, and then we have the inferior. We should have a little divider here for the atria. Drawing's not the best. And then we have out of the right ventricle comes the pulmonary artery and go to the lungs, and we come back to the left atrium via the pulmonary vein, and then this would be our aorta, which you can see ascends and descends very quickly to spread that fresh oxygen all over. So let's take a look at the first systemic circulation, and that would be the head and neck. So this is flow between the heart and the head. And the reason for this is mostly you can see that color change in those capillaries up in the head and the brain is to drop off oxygen and nutrients. I should probably add that. And to pick up carbon dioxide and waste. And so how do we do that? Well, if we leave off with the aorta here that we did, and this drawing is grossly simplified, you'll imagine that off the aorta, this would be a new artery going up to the head and through the neck, the carotid artery. You can feel your pulse through that. Gases and goods are exchanged here, and those highways, kind of the on-ramp back to the main highway is the jugular vein, and that goes through to the SBC and back to the right atrium. That's the upper head, brain, neck region. And now the limbs are going to be pretty similar. You'll see some same patterns. So again, this is blood flow between the heart and limbs. We'll do the arms first, but the goal is the same, to drop off oxygen, and again we can add nutrients, my bad, and pick up waste. And so how we do that, we just have specific vessels for that. And so our aorta, again, then branches, that we have our off-ramp. Our off-ramp here for the arm is and you have right and left ones, but we'll just call this the subclavian artery. And just like the other one, name the same thing, just the subclavian vein. And that goes back to the superior vena cava. It merges and then into the right atrium. And you'll see a lot of this where you'll have the same name on one side as the other, just an artery versus a vein. Oops, and let me go back. We'll do the legs really quickly. The same thing. Aorta goes down here, and the off-ramp is the iliac artery going to both legs. And the on-ramp back to the heart is the iliac vein. However, it does not take the superior vena cava. It would take the inferior vena cava to the right atrium. And now, probably the trickiest part is looking at the gut, the intestines, and the liver. So we're actually going to do 3 different circuits here. We're going to take a look at the hepatic, which is just going through the liver, and the intestinal, which is going through the intestines, and it kind of, you can see it bypasses, it goes through the liver, and then we'll look at this short little circuit right here called the hepatic portal circuit. So let's look at this picture. You can see similar patterns. We have the aorta here going down, and we see several off ramps, and then we can see some on ramps going back via the inferior vena cava. So for the intestinal circuit, this is blood flow between the heart and digestive organs, like specifically the small intestine. And the reason we need this circuit, just like the others, drop off oxygen, pick up CO2, but we're also picking up something new here. We're picking up a fresh batch of nutrients from the foods we eat. And you can see that in the picture here. So the route that this takes after we exit from the aorta, this first major artery is called the mesenteric artery. That subdivides into the capillaries where we pick up nutrients, and then those capillaries merge back together into the hepatic portal vein. And you can see that that's going into the liver. And we take the hepatic vein then out of the liver, and that merges with the inferior vena cava. That's the intestinal circuit. The hepatic circuit. This one's pretty traditional. Our first off-ramp is from the aorta is the hepatic artery. And so this is a circulation between the heart and the liver. And the reason being is just like the others, to do the gas exchange, but here's our bonus. The liver's job, well, it's a lot of jobs, but the main one we're going to focus on for the hepatic circuit is to remove toxins like different prescriptions you might be on or alcohol that you've taken. The liver does that, removes those things from the blood, And so this circuit is pretty straightforward. Like I said, the hepatic artery is the main one off the aorta. That will go into the liver, go into those little capillaries of the liver, and then it will start to merge back together in the hepatic vein, the IVC, and back to the heart. The last circuit in the gut, in the mid region here, is the hepatic portal circuit. And this is a pretty short one, but it's unique. So this is blood flow just really between the intestines and the liver. And so this has a special function. Now, if you remember, in the intestines here, we've picked up lots of nutrients from foods we've eaten. And what happens is, instead of kind of just having its own like vessel that goes back straight to the inferior vena cava, we take a different route. We go through the liver, and reason being is because there's so many nutrients, our liver wants to take some of those nutrients out right away and put them in storage because we really don't need them all. So instead of going straight back to the inferior vena cava in the heart, we make a little pit stop in the liver, drop off some excess nutrients, and then we go on our merry way. So this is kind of embedded within the intestinal circuit, if you will. So if you think about how it gets through here, it has to go through the intestinal circuit, the mesenteric artery, through the intestines, then the HPV, hepatic portal vein, through the liver, and then back through the hepatic vein, the IVC, and the heart. If you look at it a little bit different, you can see all the different circulation routes here. You can see the hepatic circulation through the artery, the liver, and the hepatic vein to the vena cava. That's a pretty traditional route. You can see then the mesenteric route through the intestines. We pick up nutrients. We go through the liver, the vein, and the IVC. And again, keep in mind, there's no such thing as a mesenteric vein that would go straight back to the IVC in the heart. It always goes through the liver, and we've discussed why, to drop off that those extra nutrients. So here it is again. You can see the different circulation patterns, but now we have one more left, and that's the renal circuit. So the only thing left on this picture are the kidneys. So let me go back here. Pretty traditional route. We're going to have an artery here, a vein here that goes to the inferior vena cava. So if we blow those up, here's our aorta, here's our IVC. And so those are special arteries and veins you can see right here. And so this is a renal circuit is blood flow between the heart and the kidneys. The reason being, our blood needs to get its waste removed. So not only is CO2 a waste, but our cells produce something called urea. And we want to get that out of our blood, and our kidneys are experts at that. So our blood gets filtered in the kidneys so that we can remove that waste, and that waste will go down the ureter and into the bladder, and that's where it will sit as urine until we're ready to get rid of it. So how does it do this? Well, we have to go into our kidneys through the first off-ramp from the aorta is what's known as the renal artery. And we make it simple. How do we get back to the IVC, the renal vein? And you can see those two on here, the artery and the vein there. And so that's systemic circulation patterns. You want to be able to, if you want to pause this and see if you can kind of go through and label the major vessels. And you should also know what happens in those major organs and why blood goes to each one of those. And keep in mind, we have a lot of blood vessels. That's a simplification of the process. So these are some of those major arteries and veins, but you can be thankful it does not look like this. But at the same time thankful because we want to get a blood carrying all those good things to every nook and cranny of our body. And so I hope that was helpful.